who or what inspired you to get into the entertainment industry?
Oh, wow. Maya, there were a lot of actors that I admired when I was a kid. I actually, I was very lucky, and I became a professional actor when I was a teenager. But the person that I think, because it was a long time ago, but the person that I think really made me consider for the first time, I think I would like to try and do this, was an actor named Ben Vereen. And I'm not sure if you would know Ben. He was really a very popular actor in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but he's an older man now and he hasn't been cast as much. But Ben was primarily a Broadway theater performer. He was an actor, singer, an extraordinary dancer. I first saw him, I think in Jesus Christ Superstar on Broadway. He was the first Judas Iscariot, I think. And I certainly saw him as Judas Iscariot. And then he created the role of the leading player in the musical Pippin. And that's when I saw him. I was about 12 or 13 years old, and I saw him in Pippin. And he was everything I wanted to be and would never be. he was just so powerful and charismatic and magical, and he had this mystique about him, and he moved like a serpent. He was just so beautiful to watch, and his performance was so exciting. And that show at that time really sang to me. And I saw it actually 21 times when I was a kid. And I mostly went back for his performance to watch what he was doing. And within weeks of seeing him for the first time, I said, I'm going to take singing classes and I'm going to take dancing classes. And I think I maybe really want to try and be an actor. So it was largely Ben Vereen that made me want to try and do all this.
Oh, cool. So you played George Costanza in Seinfeld, and that show was so funny. What was it like to be part of such an iconic show?
Well, the easy way to describe it is as much fun as you and anybody else has watching it, we had 10 times as much fun doing it. It was, it was surprising how much we enjoyed each other because, as you can imagine, well, maybe you don't know, none of us knew each other before we met to do the show. So we were all strangers. And when you sign up to do a series with people, it's kind of like a marriage where you never get to see who you're marrying until the wedding day. And then you show up, and I realized very quickly how much I really enjoyed these people and how much I was laughing being around them and learning being around them. And the shows, even though the Seinfeld show, it became a big hit, but for the first one or two, and maybe even part of the third season, it was not a big hit. It was a show that was struggling to find an audience, and the network wasn't quite sure what to do with it or where to put it. But even in those difficult days, those early days, it was always so much fun to do. And I kept saying to my wife, they're gonna learn the secret soon, that they don't really need to pay me for this, because I'm just going to work, laughing myself silly and coming home. I don't know how, I can't believe they're paying me to do that. Yeah. And then the show slowly but surely became kind of this phenomenal success that I don't think any of us really imagined, but we're delighted. And even though we stopped making the show in 1999, it is still, there are new audiences for it every year. Netflix just put it on its air. So it seems to be the show about nothing that never goes away.
So could you relate to George in any way?
Sure. Sure. I think one of the reasons that the George character is as liked as he is by people, because, he's really not the greatest person in the world. He's very selfish. He will do anything, to help himself, sometimes at the cost of others. we're not sure what it is he's actually good at. But what I always loved about George was I always thought that George had a very good heart, and that the world had never been very kind to George. And I knew a lot of kids growing up who I have not seen as adults. I don't know them as adults, but I would imagine they're very good and very successful adults in their lives, but they were kind of lost as kids and as teenagers. They didn't quite have a group that they fit in with. They didn't have a calling. They didn't have a passion. They didn't have a thing that they really loved doing. And I'm sure they would go on to find it in life. But I always thought George was one of those guys who never quite fit in, never quite had his group. But if he was part of a group, he would have been a very well-loved member. He just never had it. So to me, he was always a guy who was doing his best, even if his best he knew wasn't very good. He always was trying to do his best. And then since he didn't think much of himself, he would do things to make himself seem better than he was. But of course, they weren't real, so he couldn't hold on to it. If he told somebody he was an architect or he was a marine biologist, and he's not an architect or a marine biologist, and eventually they would ask him something about architecture or marine biology, and he'd have to, he'd be caught in his own lie. But I understood. I always felt I was a shy kid, and I didn't have a ton of friends, and I wasn't always sure where I fit in. And I always felt like kind of the smallest, least important person in the room, and, wanting to be bigger than I was, or bigger than life, or somehow feel like I was more important or more something, more valuable in some way. And so I understood that about George, and I actually found him very charming and very funny. And also George, the character, had a lot in common with our producer, Larry David. And I really loved Larry David. I still love Larry David. So the fact that I was trying to model the character on Larry and make everything that I appreciated and liked and thought was adorable about Larry come to life in the character made him somebody I could really connect with and have fun playing.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so you guest starred in one of my all-time favorite shows, The New Adventures of Old Christine.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, what was it like to reunite with Julia Louis-Dreyfus?
Well, anything with Julia is pretty wonderful. So of all the people on Seinfeld, I felt closest to Julia, and not for other reasons other than she and I were the only two of the four that were married when we were doing the show. And she was having her two sons at exactly the same time my wife and I were having our two sons. So we kind of we're all pregnant together. And then Julia and I were able to we worked together a couple of times outside of Seinfeld, even when Seinfeld was still being made. We did a movie together, and we did a stage benefit in New York together. So we enjoyed working together, and we enjoyed, hanging out together and our friendship. So when she asked me to come do her show, I was very flattered. The most embarrassing part is I was playing her gynecologist, and that put me in some pretty crazy positions where I had never been with Julia. So that was a little bit of, well, all right, okay, we're going to do that. But it was wonderful to be with her. And what people should know about Julia is, when you're the star of a show, you kind of set the tone for that show. What are people going to be like? If you have a guest on the set, or if you have a guest actor, how are people going to be treated? How are they going to be respected? How are they going to be welcomed? And Julia is the greatest hostess in the world. So going to her set was, people liked being there. People enjoyed each other. People were welcoming. People were enthusiastic. All reflections of Julia herself. So it was it was a ton of fun. I wish, I wish we could have done more, but it was just that one.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's one of my favorite episodes of the show. I think it's so funny.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. Um, so you've been in and have guest starred in so many things. Have you had a favorite project or character you've played?
I don't know about favorites. I've had stuff that I've really enjoyed. Things that you could probably find. So I won't talk about my theater things because you can't find them. But I did an episode. I was a Star Trek nut when I was a kid, so I always wanted to be on Star Trek, and I was invited to do an episode of Star Trek Voyager, and I played an alien, and they glued all this stuff on me, and I was an evil alien, so that was kind of fun. And I got to be on when you are shooting a Star Trek show, they really kind of build the ship, and so when you go on the set, you close one door and you're on the ship. I mean, it's kind of like being in Disneyland, so that was kind of cool. I really liked. I've played with the Muppets several times. I did an episode of The Muppet Show. I did Sesame Street, and I've really loved playing with the Muppets. I've done a bunch of musicals on television. I did Bye Bye Birdie, and I did Cinderella with Whitney Houston and Brandy and Whoopi Goldberg and Bernadette Peters. So all of that stuff was really fun. What makes it's not having favorite characters. What I enjoy is walking into projects where everybody that is there to do really good work, but everybody is really there to make a great place to work together and enjoy each other. Because, we're not saving the world by making TV shows. So the least we can do is make it a fun, safe, happy, enjoyable place to be and do the best work we can. And every time I've walked into those situations, they've been really great and special, and they stay in my memory.
Oh, cool. So you were also in the movie Pretty Woman.
Yeah.
Did you have any idea that it was going to become such a hit?
No. In fact, I don't think any of us thought it would be a hit at all. There's a really kind of interesting and a little bit long story, and I won't go into all of it, but the script of Pretty Woman and the movie of Pretty Woman are actually very kind of different. I mean, the basic story is the same, but the script of Pretty Woman was kind of a dramedy. It was much more serious. They didn't end up together at the end. I mean, that'll give you some idea of how serious it was. Yeah. And the actors would show up to kind of make this quasi-serious movie, but then we had Gary Marshall as our director, and he had a whole different movie in his head. He had the Pretty Woman in his head. And so we were doing all kinds of crazy things that we couldn't understand. We couldn't, that weren't in the script, and that he was kind of helping us make up on the spot. And we all had a really good time doing that, but we literally couldn't see the forest for the trees. We couldn't see how these little crazy moments we were creating that weren't in the script was going to somehow tell a story. We just didn't see it. And when the movie was finally put together and we saw it for the first time, we were all stunned. We had no idea that what he was grabbing in these little moments that seemed to have no connection to each other was actually this kind of fantastic, magical fairy tale story. And so I think we were all shocked at how good it was. And then I think we were all blown away by how much the audience loved it and how long it ran in the movies when it first came out. And I mean, it's always on TV. It's never ending. They made a Broadway musicals out of it. So it's like, it's just one of those stories that people just keep coming back to. And no, we had no idea. None.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I saw it a few years ago. My family and I watched it. our mom showed it to us because my sister and I heard all these references to it and all these different TV shows. So we were like, we have to watch this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And how amazing was Julia Roberts in that movie?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
She was just,
Yeah.
she was so, I mean, I think that was like her second or third movie. She wasn't a very experienced actress, and she was so young. She was 20 or 21 when we made that movie. And she's radiant. She glows. I mean, she's just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So my next question for you is actually about Broadway. Mm-hmm. So I know that you've been on Broadway and you won a Tony. So I have two questions. So one, what is the biggest challenge of live theater?
Well, there's live theater and then there's Broadway. So, Broadway is one of those things. There are lots of actors that, they're kind of weekend warriors. They do shows Friday through Sunday. They're not necessarily on Broadway where you're working 6 days a week and doing 8 shows in 6 days. So when you're working on Broadway, the challenges are things like taking care of yourself. It's hard to explain to people who don't do it because a Broadway show at most is 3 hours. Most of them are between 2 and 3 hours. And you would think, well, it's not so hard to work for 2 to 3 hours. That doesn't seem so bad. But those 2 to 3 hours tend to ask an actor to do extraordinary things, to use their voice in very powerful ways, especially if they're singing, to use their body in very strenuous ways, especially if they're dancing, to be emotionally in the right place to do the character's journey. And you have to be up. You can't walk onto a Broadway stage, like a sloth. You have to have energy in your body. So the biggest challenge for most Broadway actors is to take care of themselves, to not overuse their voice when they're not on stage, to take care of their bodies, to get enough sleep, to eat right, to not drink, to do all the things you have to do to think of yourself almost like an athlete. And that's a lot of discipline. And then for the most part, and this is the thing that's hard to explain to people who don't do it, it's the same show all the time, but it's not. There are little subtle differences every night. And the audience, when you're on stage long enough, you learn that audiences have a personality and they have an energy. And every night, the audience is different. So you're always kind of responding. You're trying to do your show and keep an eye and an ear on your audience to go, what are they getting? What do they like? What do they need? Do I go faster, slower, louder, softer? Do I lean on the funny stuff, or do they like the more dramatic stuff? So it is a very challenging 3 hours. And if you have a day that is 2 shows, a matinee and an evening, that's 6 hours where you have to make that all come together. And it's not the job, it's the lifestyle that Broadway actors have to get used to. You can't do much of anything else.
Yeah. As you're explaining that, I had a couple thoughts. One, that just Broadway is amazing. And 2, that, it seems like such a long day that would be exhausting. And for me, I was thinking like too much interaction with people and like trying to follow everything they're saying for so long. So
yes, you have to enjoy, to be an actor at all, and certainly a stage actor, you have to enjoy people. If you don't like being around people or you don't like interacting with people, it's a really stupid career to go into because it's all about being with people and getting people to interact with what you're doing. So you have to be a people person.
Yeah. So, and my second question about Broadway is, what is your favorite Broadway musical?
Ever?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's the hardest question in the world because they're so different. You know, different musicals do different things. I mean, there are old shows that I love because they're still so good. Things like Fiddler on the Roof is a great musical. And then there are new shows that are so contemporary and so different that you go, oh my God, like Hamilton, you know. And then there are all kinds of shows in between. Nothing has ever made me cry in a theater like Dear Evan Hansen did when I saw it on Broadway. And then there are musicals that just make you laugh, like Spamalot and Book of Mormon, and you know, silly things. So I couldn't pick one. You know, if I was lucky, I could get to, well, the funniest one, the saddest one, the most exciting one, the coolest rock score, the coolest old score. You know, you could do things like that, but there isn't just one that is my all-time. And I will say this: one of my favorites is a musical by Stephen Sondheim called Sweeney Todd, and I've seen that many, many times, and I just think it's an incredible story. And his music is incredible, and it's usually staged so magnificently. And it's a lot of musicals. Once you see it, you've seen everything it has to offer, and you might like the score, you like the story, so you go back. You know, like people go back and they see Wicked 3, 4, 5 times, or Lion King 3, 4, 5 times because there's so much to look at. You know, but for Sweeney Todd, for me, every time I see it, I learn something inside that story that I didn't see before. So in that way, I think it's kind of spectacular.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I've always loved Broadway, but over quarantine, I just became like completely obsessed.
Do you listen to like the Broadway channel on Sirius Radio and stuff?
I don't. I actually didn't know about that.
So, I'm not doing a commercial for Sirius Radio, but on channel 72 of the Sirius radio stations, it's all Broadway all the time.
Oh, cool.
You might really like that.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. We actually, just talking about Dear Evan Hansen, like my family and I have always loved the soundtrack to that and to Hamilton. Mm-hmm. And so we were so excited when Hamilton came out on Disney Plus. And then and then just over the weekend, we went to see the Dear Evan Hansen movie. And that was so good.
I'm glad you liked it.
We actually saw it for mine and my sister's birthday. And so it was so good.
Well, first of all, happy birthday. And second of all, I'm so glad. I haven't seen the movie yet, so I'm anxious to see it, but I'm glad that you liked it.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm obsessed with now that is like one of my favorite movies.
I get it.
So what show are you currently binge watching?
Oh boy, we have a bunch. Well, in the drama side, we've been watching a show called Money Heist, which I just love. It's a show, it was actually made in Spain. It's all in Spanish, and you can either hear it dubbed or you can read the subtitles. But that's a really amazing, it's many, many seasons of this group of people that you come to really get involved with, trying to rob the biggest bank in Spain, and all kinds of crazy things happen. But that's very compelling. There's a show that, it was a British show, and my wife and I started watching the British show, and then as soon as we started watching the British show, an American version just started being made for CBS. But we've been watching the British one so far, and it's called Ghosts. And it's about this couple that move they inherit a haunted house, and only the wife, can see and hear all the ghosts. And it's about, their interactions together. And we're just having so much fun with it. And Ted Lasso is a show that we love. And I became, during the pandemic, I got stuck on the Great British Baking Show. So I've been, watching and baking and trying to figure out how to do all that.
Yeah, I'm actually so happy that you mentioned ghosts because that's
You
like
know
my
it?
new obsession.
It's
Yeah,
great. Yeah.
yeah, it is. My mom and I have been meaning to watch the British version, so we're gonna go watch that because I've only seen the CBS version. I
It's
think
yeah.
it's so funny.
You will be really surprised at which characters they kept for the American version, and the differences between them. But they're both terrific. But the British one, I don't know how many seasons they did, but we're well into the end of the second season or the beginning of the third season. I can't remember. So there's a lot more episodes to watch on the British version right now.
Oh, cool. Yeah, and then Ted Lasso is I'm also just
Fantastic.
obsessed with that show.
Yep,
Yeah.
we all are.
Yeah. So if you could have any song playing to announce your entrance into a room, what song would it be and why?
I have never, ever thought about that. An entrance into a room. Well, the one that I wouldn't have to think very hard about, there's a very old song. And oftentimes when I do a talk show, the band will play it as I walk on. There's a song called Alexander's Ragtime Band. It's a really old song. And for some, it's like a Dixieland song. And for some reason, many orchestras play that for me when I go on. So I'll take that one. That's fine.
Cool. Yeah. What personality trait has gotten you in the most trouble?
Oh, yeah, that's tricky. Here's the thing. So when I was younger and I had all these fantasies about being an actor, they weren't particularly about being a comedic actor. And I never really thought of myself as particularly funny. And then I started playing funny characters, and okay. But I sometimes you're in situations and you think, well, I'm going to try and be funny. I'm going to try and see if I can come up with something that's funny. And it's not that it doesn't happen very often, but it happens enough, and it happens to a lot of people where they tell a joke or they make a comment or they try and do something thinking it will be amusing and people will laugh. And instead somebody's feelings get hurt or somebody gets offended. And it's not really a character trait. It's just something about myself that I go, I wish I knew how to do both correctly. I wish I knew all the time that I try to be funny about something. I wish I could do it in a way that really made people laugh, but never put anybody in the position of going, well, I didn't like what he said because maybe that's me. And it's really hard to do because a lot of comedy is about the things that make us silly. I mean, George, when I was playing George, I had to make fun of myself all the time. I mean, my body, my hair, the characters' failures, and as they sat on me. And I never had any problem with that. I don't mind making fun of myself. I don't mind people, in a way, making fun of me if I know they're doing it with love. But some people, it doesn't matter. They don't quite see that you're trying to do something positive, and they just get their feelings hurt. And there's really no knowing what's going to do that. And so it's hard. I really admire the comedians that can keep going and going and going, and they're always really good. Like Jerry Seinfeld. I don't think Jerry tends to upset anybody when he does comedy, and yet he's really, really funny. But every now and then I have, said something in the moment thinking, oh, this will be funny. And then it wasn't so funny to somebody. And I wish I could take all of them back and apologize for all that stuff. But we try. All we can do is try.
Yeah. So if you could have anyone narrate your life, who would it be?
Anyone?
Yeah.
Well, I'll take Morgan Freeman just because of that voice. They're going to narrate my life. I at least want that fantastic voice to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is your biggest pet peeve?
My biggest pet peeve. I don't know if I have a pet peeve, because pet peeves to me are something that are like small things that people do that just become annoying. That's kind of like a pet peeve. I just generally, I am saddened over the last couple of years how unkind people have become with each other. I don't understand it. We've always been able to disagree with each other. Not everybody feels and thinks and sees the world the same way. And we were able years ago to disagree with people and not think of them as our enemies or think of them as having to be torn down or destroyed. And the amount of, really ugly behavior in the world by people that should know better is very sad. It's really very sad. And I think we're all struggling with it to try and figure out why it's happening and to try to stop it from happening and get back to some kind of goodness and decency between all of us,
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Sometimes I'll like see something on social media and it's either like something really kind that somebody did that I'm like, oh, my faith in people is restored, and then I'll see something like horrible that someone did. I was like, nope, gone again.
I know. It's hard. It's hard. It's I think everyone is struggling right now to try and, a lot of things are changing. We're realizing a lot of things. A lot of people who were not able to speak up and tell their own stories years ago, from people of color to women to LGBTQ community, are now telling their stories in different ways. And it's making all of us realize, hey, we didn't always get it before, and we have to change our behavior. And some people get really upset that the idea that we have to change our behavior, who says, And, I have gotten to a place and an age where I just want everybody to have a good life. I want people to be able to pursue their dreams and have the things they need to get by and have people around them that like and love them. And life is short. We should just be doing what you are doing. This podcast is a really kind and generous thing that you do. And it's very loving. And that's why I think people like me and all your other guests are so happy to be a part of it, because it is such a beautiful, loving thing that you are giving to people. And if we all could, focus our attention on things like that, the world would be a better place.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you.
So is there a line from a movie, book, or song that's always resonated with you?
There is. Talk about being kind. There is. I talk about this all the time. It's from a play called A Raisin in the Sun by a playwright named Lorraine Hansberry. It was one of the first great commercial Broadway plays about the Black experience in America. And in the play, the grown son of the family, sort of the man who is sort of in charge of the family, makes a big mistake, and he invests in something that he thinks is going to be great for everybody, but he gets ripped off and he loses all the money. And a lot of members of the family turn on him, and they hate him because now with that money gone, he's sort of stolen their dreams. And his mother is very kind to him still. And the man's sister says to their mother, how can you still be so kind to him? How can you love him when he's done this to all of us? And the mother has a great answer. And this is what she says. And I have to say it the way she says it. She says, baby, when do you think is the time to love someone the most? When they've done good and made everything easy for everybody? Nope. It's when they're at their lowest and can't believe in themselves anymore because the world's done whipped them so. And I love that idea. What it is what it means to me is everybody is capable of great things and everybody is capable of terrible things. And most of the time when we do terrible things, it's a mistake. But if you treat somebody on the day they've made their biggest mistake, the way you would treat them on the day they've done their best thing, you can help them find their way out of their mistake and come back to being the best person they can possibly be. And that, to me, is what real love is all about.
Yeah, I love that.
It's pretty, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great play. It's a great play. It doesn't get done nearly enough. There's a wonderful movie of it that people can see, but it's a great play.
What is it called?
It's called A Raisin in the Sun.
Okay. I think I've heard that name somewhere.
It's been around since the 1950s or 60s. So yeah, you probably bumped into it somewhere.
Yeah. So what do you do to cheer yourself up when you're having a bad day?
I do music. I sing. I go to the piano. I sing. Or I go, about 8 years ago, I started taking pottery lessons. So I go to a studio and I take clay and I throw it on a wheel and I make vases and bowls and cups. And that I know it sounds silly, but that makes me really happy. And hanging out with my friends and my family, it doesn't take much. I am very aware how lucky I am that the people I love most are close by and that I get to hold them close almost anytime I need or want. So, when I'm having a bad day, I try and bring the people I care about to me. And maybe do something for them. But, my mother once told me, when you're having a bad day and you think the world is terrible and you think you're a horrible person and you think nobody loves you and nobody appreciates you and nobody is giving you what you deserve, that's the day you should do something for somebody else. And all of that stuff will go away.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And the pottery thing does not sound like silly at all. I totally get that. Like, art is so therapeutic.
It's the best. It's the best. It's so much fun. And I love the way it feels. Some people don't, but I love the way it feels. And it's like a magic trick when these things come out, you make them and then you glaze them and you put them in this oven and they come out and they do magical things. You go, oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah. So my last question for you is, who do you consider to be a real life superhero and why?
Wow. I can tell you about one person in my life who I think is a hero. And you may not know his name, but you probably know something he's been part of. So his name is Daniel Lebetsky. And if you know anything about him, it's because you have eaten at some point a Kind bar. He is the man who created the Kind Company. But he's created lots of companies. And what Daniel does in his business life is, Kind bars are made up of lots of different ingredients. There's nuts and there's dried fruits and there's all kinds of things, chocolate and all coffee, all kinds of things have to go into it. And they come from different places in the world. And what Danny does, and what he did in his other companies as well, is he would take people who were not friends. Sometimes they were enemies. Sometimes they were religious sects that didn't get along, or sometimes they were like Israelis and Palestinians, right? And he would take, for instance, an Israeli farmer who grew almonds and a Palestinian farmer who grew olives and said, I'm going to use your olive oil and your almonds in my new product. So now you guys are in business together. and you better take care of each other. And he used business to build bridges between people who were not getting along. And as a result of that, he has created these incredible alliances. He's done a lot of healing between people. Danny works. The newest thing that he's trying to do right now is start a movement that's called Starts With Us, where people take responsibility for creating kindness throughout the world. And he puts so much of his heart and time and energy and money into these ideas. You know, it costs him money. It's when he's making Kind bars, it's not always the most economical thing to use that farmer and that farmer. He could make better deals, but he wants to build a bridge between those two people. So the way he treats people, the way he treats business, the way he thinks about improving the world and the scope in which he imagines doing it, to me is so inspirational. It's so big. It's so hopeful that he's, for a long time, he's been one of my big heroes. And he's somebody that most people don't even know who he is.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's so cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's great. And hopefully this Starts With Us. Hopefully that will be something over the next year or two that really takes off, and you'll hear much more about that and Danny.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the people I look up to the most, I mean, besides my mom and my sister, is her name is Jacinda Ardern. She's the Prime Minister of New Zealand.
Yes,
I think
brilliant.
she is. Yeah, I think she is amazing, and she's so inspiring, and I just love her.
Oh yeah, I mean, I could have mentioned so many, but you know who I hope to meet one day, just because I just want to soak in some of her magic, is Malala Yousafzai. I think, I can't remember her last name, Yousafzai, something like that, but everyone knows her as Malala. Yeah. She's extraordinary. And Amanda Gorman, who read her poem at the inauguration. I mean, there are so many amazing, heroic, brilliant, smart, caring, hardworking folk out there. And I love heroes that do things quietly and nobody makes a big fuss about it. And then you find out and go, oh, they were heroes not for any attention. They were heroes because they were heroes, you know?
Yeah. There's actually I just want to share one more person, because I just love sharing, you know, these strong, like, amazing women. It's her name is Chanel Miller.
And tell me what she does.
Well, she has a book out, and she's an artist, and she had like something really terrible happen to her, and it could have easily could have easily like ruined her life, but she took it and like she made something positive out of the situation. And I love that. I think it's so inspiring. And so, my mom and my sister, and then Chanel and Jacinda are like my biggest inspirations.
That's fantastic. Fantastic.
It's thank you so much for calling in.
Thank you for having me. I'm sorry it only took a couple of years, right? But we made it.
Yeah. And I was just wondering if I could take another quick picture.
Absolutely.
I'll sneak out of here.
Yeah.
There we go. I'm back out. I'm still in, but I'm out. Cute.
Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure, okay. Maya. It was so nice to chat with you. Thanks for inviting me.
You. Of course. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Continued success, and hopefully we'll find somewhere else to meet soon.
Yeah.
Thank you for spending so much time with Children's Hospital Colorado today. And we'll hope to, I know Maya will keep us updated on where to see you next. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, ladies.
Bye-bye.
See you again.
Bye.
Take good care. Bye now.